Captives of a Concept, Chapter 2, entitled The Most Important Scripture in Watchtower Theology. This chapter opens up by talking about how the most detailed explanation of this scripture is presented in the book entitled God's Kingdom of 1,000 Years Has Approached, and that was published in 1973. An important note is that it's not necessary to just understand the interpretation or to agree with it, whether it's biblically correct or not. We're just going to concern ourselves if it's historically correct. And when we say historically correct, we're talking about what went on in their history if it agrees with the way they interpret Matthew chapter 24, verses 45 through 47. The January 15, 2008 Watchtower says this, quote, "When Christ inspected the faithful and discreet slave in 1918, he found those anointed ones on earth to be faithful in providing spiritual food at the proper time. Hence Jesus was pleased thereafter to appoint them over all his belongings." End quote. So in 1918, Jesus began to make an examination of all religions claiming to represent him, to see if any of them had been faithfully and discreetly providing true teachings of the Bible, which is spiritual food, and if these true teachings were at the proper time. The witnesses claim that the only religion Jesus found doing so was the Watchtower Society, and so therefore the big thing is Jesus appointed them over all his earthly interests or belongings in the spring of 1919. Now that has been changed in the July 15th, 2013 Watchtower. It does say that in 1919 they were not appointed over Jesus' belongings, only over the domestics. So that was a major change. Almost 100 years they were saying that they were appointed over all his belongings. And then they changed that up and they said that no, that it was only over the domestics. So for almost 100 years they were teaching of an appointment that was not made by Jesus, nor was it made by Jehovah. So logically that appointment for about 100 years was an appointment from men. And so this book, God's Kingdom of 1,000 Years Has Approached, it says this on pages 350 through 355. Just a small snippet. Quote, "The serving of food, the right sort of food at the proper time, was the issue. It had to be according to this that a decision must be rendered by the returned master. On inspecting the society in the year 1919, Jesus Christ did find the appointed slave faithful and discreet in feeding his disciples." So it's evident that Jesus would not base his decision on what the society would be teaching as of today or after 1919. That's interesting because the governing body prefers to draw attention to what the society is teaching today, as they do in the June 1st, 2001 Watchtower. Another quote from that book, God's Kingdom of 1,000 Years Has Approached, on pages 349 and 350. Quote, "Could they, by even their latest record of teachings down till 1919, prove that they themselves were the composite and faithful and discreet slave class of Jesus Christ? The quality of the food itself was to be considered." End quote. So we need to make sure that the Bible students were teaching the right things at the right time. And what was Jesus' decision? Well, the book simply says that they met the test. Whoop-de-doo. No proof and in nothing of the sort, just that they met the test. They didn't pass the test. They just met it. They showed up. So when Jehovah's Witnesses are asked, why do you believe the society is God's organization? They should all answer something to the effect, because of Jesus' appointment in 1919, which fulfilled Matthew chapter 24, verses 45 to 47. So it all rests and depends on what that decision was in 1919. And again, that decision is based solely upon what they had been teaching up until 1919. And why is that important? To me, it would be like appointing or electing a teenager as the President of the United States, because we know what type of person this person is going to be when they grow up. That's just kind of ridiculous. So this decision that Jesus made in 1919, it had to have been based on what they were teaching up until 1919. Anything afterwards doesn't matter. So what happened in 1919? Well, we have to examine the same teachings that they say Jesus examined from 1918 to 1919 to see if they really could have passed such an examination. It makes an interesting point that Jehovah's Witnesses have never done this. If you were a Jehovah's Witness or currently are one, have you made that such same examination that Jesus Christ made in 1919? Have you looked at the spiritual food that was being served up until 1919? I know I didn't. I didn't do that until after I was waking up to the religion, and by that time it's too late. What's interesting also is that the society no longer publishes any of the literature that they say Jesus examined in 1918 through 1919. You can't find it anywhere. You can't even order it from them. You have to get it through the internet. Such a historical event, monumental in the history of all religion, yet not provided by the Watchtower Society. So, using Watchtower standards to judge Watchtower teachings. This is a very interesting subheading, because the religious leaders of the Watchtower have always set strict standards when judging other religions. We know that. We were raised in it. We were born in it. We were in the cult for some time. We know what the judging that goes on in that religion. Why is that appropriate? Well, because Matthew chapter 7 verse 2 says, with what judgment you are judging, you will be judged. So we have to use Watchtower standards to judge Watchtower teachings. And there's a footnote here on footnote number 36, which is interesting. It mentions that the June 1st, 2001 Watchtower says, logically, to enjoy God's backing, one must, number one, teach only what God reveals in His Word, and number two, reject teachings based on human wisdom or tradition. End quote. So logically then, in order for the society to have God's backing today, they must have met these two standards from the time Charles Russell began printing in 1876 up until 1919, when Jesus made his decision. So this will bring a conclusion to chapter 2 of Captives of a Concept, the most important scripture in Watchtower theology. I thank you for your time and have a great day. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you for taking time to watch and listen to this presentation. Post your comments, like and share this video, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for the next episode.